Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why it is so hard to remember new things sometimes, especially after you've learned some information that is really familiar to it? Well, this new study might have a clue. This research dives deep into how learning new words, or even relearning lost words after something like a stroke, can be tricky. Specifically, it looks at how words that sound or mean similar things can mess with our ability to learn. It's like trying to find a specific book in a library where all the books with similar titles are crammed together. Think about it. When we learn new things, especially words, our brains are building connections. But sometimes our brains get overloaded or confused when similar pieces of information are presented too close together. This is especially true for people who have had a stroke and are trying to regain their language abilities. These individuals often struggle with something called lexical retrieval, which is basically the ability to pull the right word out of their brain when they need it. Now, the researchers focused on two main ways people with language difficulties can struggle. One group has an activation deficit. Imagine trying to find a specific tool in a cluttered toolbox. For them, it is hard to even get the right tool activated or brought forward. They might miss words or have trouble getting started. The other group has an inhibition deficit. For these folks, it is like the toolbox is overflowing with similar tools. They activate lots of words but have a really hard time picking the correct one. They might blurt out the wrong word that is similar to the one they want, or say a bunch of related words. So the big question was, how does learning words that are semantically similar affect these two different types of word retrieval problems? Do similar words help or hurt when you are trying to relearn them? To find out, they worked with two amazing individuals, XR and QD, who perfectly fit these two profiles. XR had trouble activating words, while QD had trouble inhibiting similar competing words. They trained them for 6 weeks on new words. They designed special training sets for each person. They picked words that both XR and QD struggled to say. Then they organized these words into 3 conditions. One group of semantically related words, meaning words with similar meanings or from the same category, like fruits. Another group of completely unrelated words. And a third group called mixed blocks, which had words from different categories but not directly related to each other. They used a variety of learning techniques, like repeating words, asking them to recall the words, and giving them hints about the word's meaning. They had them come in for an hour each week for 6 weeks. Each session involved learning these word sets. Importantly, they tested them not just right after training, but also 1 week later, and then further down the line at 2-6, and even 16 weeks after they finished training. This was to see how well they remembered the words over the long haul, and if the semantic similarity had a lasting effect. They called this short-term, medium-term, and long-term retention. During the actual training sessions, both XR and QD sometimes found it harder to learn the words when they were presented in semantically related groups. For XR, her accuracy with related words was lower than with unrelated words. QD also showed lower accuracy with related words, and this was especially true when comparing related words to the mixed groups. This hints that right from the start, similar words could be a bit of a hurdle. But interestingly, when they tested them right after a training session, things looked different. For short-term memory, both participants actually did better with the related words compared to the completely unrelated ones. But this effect became weaker over time. This is a bit surprising. It's like the initial struggle with similar words somehow made them stick better in the short term, when they looked at medium-term retention, where they tested them at the beginning of each new training session. So 1 week after the last one, the pattern started to diverge. For XR, the person with the activation deficit, her learning actually got better over time for the related word groups. The semantic similarity seemed to help her remember those words from week to week. But for QD, the person with the inhibition deficit, the pattern reversed. His medium-term retention showed that learning in the related blocks was actually worse in later sessions. This is where we see the two profiles start to clearly separate. Now, for the really important part, long-term retention, which is what we care about for lasting learning. Here is where the major findings really shine. For XR, the person with the activation deficit, semantic similarity didn't strongly impact her long-term memory. If anything, the slight advantage she had with related words in shorter intervals seemed to stick around. But for QD, The person with the inhibition deficit, semantic similarity had a definite negative effect on his long-term learning. His accuracy was significantly lower for words trained in the related condition compared to both the mixed and unrelated conditions. This means that for him, learning words that are too similar hurt his ability to remember them weeks and months later. So what does this all mean? The study found that semantic similarity is a double-edged sword. For people like XR, whose main problem is activating words, semantic similarity can actually be beneficial. It gives their brain extra pushes to get those words activated. But for people like QD, whose main problem is inhibiting competing words, semantic similarity is detrimental. Especially in the long run, it makes them more likely to get confused and remember things inaccurately. The researchers also considered if semantic similarity might be a desirable difficulty. This is an idea where making learning a bit harder can actually lead to better long-term memory. While they saw some hints of this in the short term for both participants, the long-term results didn't really support it. For QD, the difficulty with similar words just stayed difficult for XR, while she benefited. It wasn't necessarily because it was a difficult process. A really interesting finding was about how the words were grouped. They found that the negative effects of semantic similarity were worse when related items were grouped tightly together in a block. When they spread the related words out into different blocks, the negative effect lessened. This suggests that our brains might treat blocks of items as separate episodes of learning. If related words are crammed into one episode, it causes more interference. So, practically speaking, mixing up related words in your learning sessions might be a good strategy. They also checked if learning new words transferred to words they hadn't trained. Generally, the benefits or harms of similarity didn't really extend to these untrained words, which is pretty typical. Now, a big but here, this study only looked at 2 people. While XR and QD were chosen because they were very clear examples of these 2 specific deficits, most people don't have such pure profiles. Future research needs to look at larger groups with more mixed difficulties. Also, they only trained 27 items in total, which is a small number. They controlled for things like word length and frequency, which is great, but real. World language learning is much more complex. They also only focused on naming words, not understanding them, and future studies could look at that too. In conclusion, this study gives us a fascinating glimpse into how semantic similarity impacts word learning differently, depending on the type of language deficit. For those struggling to activate words, similar words can be helpful, but for those struggling to inhibit similar words, similar items can really hurt long-term retention. And crucially, for clinical practice, spreading out semantically similar words across different learning sessions rather than grouping them together could be a key strategy to help people relearn lost vocabulary more effectively. It is a reminder that learning isn't one size fits all, and understanding the nuances of our cognitive processes can unlock better ways to learn and remember. What are your thoughts on this? Have you ever noticed similar patterns when you are trying to learn something new? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dive into the science of memory and learning, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating research, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.